Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rewilding Wellness Wednesdays. I'm Dr. Kristy Vanacore. This is a podcast, yes, but even more than that, a community, a gathering place, and a movement. We come together each week to remember what it really means to be well in body, mind, and spirit and soul. This is a space to listen, to learn, to ask, and to share, a place where ancient wisdom and modern science meet, and where we stop trying to fix ourselves and begin remembering who we are. I am a medicine woman, author, lyricist, ceremonialist, and prominent trailblazer offering a different but essential approach known as rewilding wellness for children, teens, adults, and families. I utilize multidimensional and bioquantum practices for holistic healing and thriving. After witnessing the staggering rates of chronic illness in adults and children alike, and the ineffective and disempowering practices of traditional medical care, I recognized that it was my life's mission to bring the health and wellness industries back to its roots and reconnect people with their innate self-healing capacities. For over 2 decades, my work has integrated mind, body, and spirit and honors that we are vibrational beings and that true healing can only be birthed from the union of science with soul. As we heal together through frequency, embodiment, cellular recalibration, and regeneration, I guide individuals and families to rediscover the body's brilliance and timeless wisdom so you can realign with the natural synergy of all of creation. I will light the way as you remember your roots, rekindle your instincts, and reclaim your sovereignty. So thrilled to have you here with me today. This has been, if you've been following me on social media, this has been a really cool week. I decided to do kind of an unveiling of what it genuinely means to practice multidimensional health and wellness, like what this is all about, and to debunk a lot of the myths around words like holistic, for instance. So check out my social media pages to read and watch some videos from this week. But today, on this episode of Rewilding Wellness Wednesdays, I am going to be doing something a little different. And I'm going to be sharing with you an actual case example. And today we're talking about, what happens when things like anxiety and depression isn't mental. This is going to be a case unveiled. Okay. So I want to expand your understanding of what this work means and the understanding that this must acknowledge the whole human being. So many people come to me saying, I have anxiety or depression, or I can't focus, or, I've got this disorder, that disorder, I've got mental illness, and they believe it's all in their head. But mental health is never just mental. So today I'll be walking you through a real case that illustrates this truth. And as you'll hear, this story could belong to so many of us. And in many ways, it was my own story as well. So my intention is not to, criticize conventional medicine. Instead, it's to broaden your understanding of what true, rooted, integrative, holistic healing looks like. So let's dive right in. So I'm going to present to you today a story of a 43-year-old woman who came to me, and I'm going to call her Laura for the purposes of this. She has been so gracious enough to allow me to speak her story, but I'm still doing so anonymously in order to protect her privacy. So Laura is a 43-year-old woman who came to me for mental health issues, anxiety, ADHD tendencies, disordered eating, and relationship struggles, just to name a few things. Okay. And she is a mom of two. She works in a corporate financial position, a pretty high power, high demanding role. And when she came to me, she reported years of feeling off, wired but tired, very easily overwhelmed, very emotionally reactive, and increasingly struggling to stay connected and focused, whether it be at work or at home, even while driving. When when Laura first came, she said, I've tried therapy, I've tried supplements, I've tried meditation, nothing sticks. My doctor, did a basic lab test and said I was fine, but I know I'm not fine. And Laura went on to say at that first visit with me that her gynecologist suggested anti-anxiety medication. And on the surface, this seemed like a logical suggestion. But thankfully, Laura was pretty in tune with her body and recognized that it was signaling something much deeper. And that's what led her to me. She had heard about my approach and recognized that she needed to pursue something that would get even deeper to the root cause. And interestingly, when Laura came to me, she also was talking to me about her 17-year-old daughter who was experiencing many of the same symptoms, making high school a nightmare for her. And she said that she recognized a lot of the patterns that she herself has experienced in her daughter. So I'm going to walk you through what my assessment of Laura looked like. Okay. So when I first have a client meet with me and we go through a very thorough reflection and assessment process that's between 1 and 2 hours. And this is the place where I really peel back the layers of each dimension, right? So, and this is where we begin to see that certain diagnoses, such as anxiety, for instance, can arise from multiple interconnected systems. Okay. So I asked Laura to tell me her story, which she did so well, so articulately, moving through a lot of tears. And as she told her story, I made careful notes, really recognizing the energetic, the physical, the somatic, the layers of trauma, the layers of emotionality, the layers of relationship issues, the environments that she's living in. All of these layers begin to reveal themselves in her story, right? And then I begin to ask very specific and targeted questions that tap into each one of these domains. Okay. And what then tends to happen is I will usually send a client for some lab work or work with a current physician if they have one, so that we can put all of the pieces of the puzzle together. So for Laura, she had been to a cardiologist, so I reviewed all of that history. She had been to a naturopathic physician. I reviewed all of that information. She had been to her gynecologist and had some hormone testing done. I reviewed all of that information. And then I sent her for some additional testing to get some more data. Okay. And here is what we discovered. So I sit down and piece all of this together, much like a detective, much like someone piecing together a very complex puzzle. This is hours of time. This is not a 10-minute visit with a doctor. Okay. So upon careful examination of this first go round of assessment of Laura, here's what revealed itself. So first and foremost, beginning at the energetic layer. Okay, we are all energetic beings. Everything begins in our energetic biofields. Okay. So what I immediately recognized was that there were static, what I call static, in her biofields that ignited dis-ease in her system. Okay. So this included ancestral trauma from her mother's bloodline that she was carrying. that kind of came into this life with her and already started her off with some static in those biofields. Okay. We explored the fact that an early car accident left her mother near paralyzed, such that her mother was unable to take care of her for about a year of her life. We recognized that the nervous system was constantly scanning her environment for danger and perceived threat in every direction by even the most benign things, especially food, which led to so many disordered eating patterns. Right? She was in a constant state of flight or fight with this energetic system that was completely out of coherence. The physical layer revealed numerous nutritional deficiencies, particularly in magnesium, zinc, essential amino acids, and B vitamins. Her physical layer also revealed several genetic predispositions that impaired her detoxification pathways. So MTHFR and COMT mutations impacted her body's ability to detox. So her lymphatic system was sluggish. And there were various stealth infections that kept her immune system on hyper alert. Okay, so she had an active case of Epstein-Barr virus. And I had suspected at the time that she may be experiencing issues with mold, as well as possibly a tick-borne infection. Later, we received confirmation of all of that. Okay, so Laura's immune system was on hyper alert because of all of these infections. She was also experiencing blood sugar dysregulation from chronic stress and elevated cortisol and poor sleep. Her mitochondrial functioning, this is the powerhouse of the cell, right? The energy epicenter in the physical body. Her mitochondrial functioning was so poor, her cells were literally underpowered. They were struggling to stay alive. Diving into the somatic layer, this is deep in the soma, in the body, in the fascia, the connective tissue. Here is where the imprints of old trauma live and get stuck. Okay, so the fascia is meant to be a very soft, supple, flexible web in the body that allows the body to move. It basically holds all of the organs. It's basically our first nervous system. Okay. And when we experience something traumatic, that fascia hardens almost like armor to protect us and keep us safe. So she had trauma stored as tension and pain. So her body was always in pain. She ended up revealing that she was always experiencing back pain. And she just attributed it to being a bit overweight. But she had a lot of tension, a lot of tightness in her upper back, her lower back, and her hips. Her diaphragm was so tight that taking deep breaths is really hard for her. And that's why meditation, she was going to these breathwork classes and meditation classes, would make her worse, would make her feel worse, because her body did not actually feel safe enough to rest or receive. She literally could not take a breath because her body was constantly braced for impact. So these old imprints from childhood, perfectionism, hypervigilance, needing to earn love, were running subconsciously and keeping her body hard, tight, restricted, and contracted. When we dove into this relational level of Laura's life, She revealed a strained marriage that clearly mirrored her own inner disconnection. She also revealed tremendous tension in the home with her teenage daughter that triggered a lot of guilt and self-blame and shame. She spoke to her daughter in ways that just really horrified her, and yet she couldn't stop. And we realized that there was all of this emotional suppression that Laura experienced from constantly just trying to hold it all together at home and at work. And she was like a powder keg, just ready to explode. And every argument with her husband, every argument with her daughter just reactivated old attachment wounds. And when that would happen, she would automatically feel anxious. And after that anxiousness might pass, then it became depression. The shame, the self-loathing, the self-deprecation, not wanting to get out of bed. And then we dove into the environmental layer that included her occupation. Being in a highly demanding corporate role with a tremendous amount of like bureaucratic stress. At her desk, she had 5 screens that she was exposed to while sitting under synthetic fluorescent light bulbs. She drank about 6 cups of caffeinated coffee before noon each day. And her workday consisted of really long hours that tethered her to a desk. So she was not moving. A new boss had just taken over, and she was feeling extreme performance pressure. So this culture of hustle was replacing her natural rhythm with all of this artificial stimulation, and her nervous system was asked to do like 200% of what it had capacity for. Right? Her daily life was requiring more output than her system had the capacity to sustain. So each one of these threads was contributing to what she and her doctors were calling anxiety. And she tried the talk therapy. She tried the medicine. Nothing worked because there's no amount of talk therapy or medicine alone that could heal each one of these dimensions. Okay. So here's how I started working with Laura. By the way, obviously for the purposes of a, 35 to 45-minute podcast, I'm really summarizing and giving, broad strokes. But you'll get the idea here that this is a much more comprehensive perspective, right? So the first thing that I had to do with Laura was address safety. I had to help her nervous system downshift from survival mode to one that would allow her to begin the process of restoration. I collaborated with her cardiologist, her functional medicine practitioner, to interpret her labs properly. First of all, the labs that she initially had were so incomplete. And when we finally got a thorough picture of her labs, we had to interpret it through these multidimensional lenses. Immediately, we began to support her detoxification pathways, her lymph, her liver, and her gut in particular. And we did this through the use of targeted movement practices, as well as some very specific supplements, as well as nutrition. Right? I worked with Laura to look at nutrition and gentle movement, not as a punishment, but as nourishment for a beautiful sacred body temple. And that this process was going to be one of helping her to be in a better relationship with her body, helping her to see all of these beautiful dimensions of her being, and helping her to meet her body from a place of love, not hate. Eventually, I brought in sound medicine, body work, including myofascial release, craniosacral balancing, medical-based Qigong practices, Kundalini yoga practices, nervous system retraining, and breath work. I taught Laura how to listen to her body's cues and to feel emotions somatically with the body instead of intellectualizing them. So letting the mind be the loyal servant to the heart. Slowly but surely, Laura's body's rhythms began to recalibrate. Her digestion began to improve. Her sleep began to deepen. The angst and the anxiety and living like the Tin Man, so rigid and contracted, began to soften. And her emotional availability increased. Her marriage dynamics began to shift because her frequency changed. Now, I want to say something here. In the first month of Laura's work with me, as we were doing these things, we did utilize a very small dose of a safe medicine that we knew would work with her body based on the comprehensive multidimensional assessment that we did, right? In light of her genetic issues, in light of where the state of her nervous system was at, in light of her nutrition, her blood sugar, all of these things. We picked a safe medicine. We used it for 6 weeks, at which point she was able to come off of it as all of these other practices and modalities were working. So we didn't merely medicate her symptoms. We rebalanced her system, and her physiology found its rhythm. Her psychology found peace for the first time in longer than Laura could ever remember. Going back to the medicine for a moment here, when her gynecologist had suggested an anti-anxiety medication, after we received Laura's comprehensive, laboratory profile, that medication would have caused her such severe side effects, even a cardiac event, due to her unique genetic and metabolic profile, right? So this is why this integrated personalized care is so vital. Because what helps one person could harm another. What seems like, the quick fix could really do more damage. When we treat symptoms in isolation, we miss the whole story. And sometimes we end up endangering the very life that we're trying to save. So the point here is that we talk about mental health, that expression mental health. I believe it's an outdated phrase, and that we must start speaking about multidimensional health, the mind, body, spirit, that are one interconnected ecosystem. You can't heal one while ignoring the others. It's not possible. Healing is not about silencing symptoms. It's about listening to what they're trying to tell us, right? So in Laura's case, depression, anxiety, chronic fatigue, the irritability, the difficulty focusing, these were not flaws. These were messages. They were invitations for Laura to realign, to reestablish coherence in her energy body, to reestablish balance in her physical system, right? So before we label ourselves as broken, we need to ask, what rhythm in me has been disrupted? And how can I restore it? Right? We're energy beings. Energy moves in waves. Waves move in patterns, and patterns move in rhythm. We are just rhythm. And dis-ease means that our fundamental rhythm has been disrupted. But the good news is that we can restore it. We can tune our bodies like the beautiful instruments they are and recalibrate to restore the system to harmony. I want to say here for a moment that Laura's story, and again, my gosh, I'm so grateful to Laura for her trust along this journey with me, but also for allowing me to speak her story to life today. But Laura's story mirrors my story. And that's why I wrote my first book, Rewilding, a woman's quest to remember her roots, rekindle her instincts, and reclaim her sovereignty. So, this was my story of a hardworking mama trying to do everything right, build a career, raise the kids, keep the family together, heal the world. And so my body, mind, and spirit began to unravel under the weight of it all. This was my story, the story of a woman who spent years helping others find balance while I was secretly losing my own. I had silenced my own instincts to fit into a system that continuously prized productivity over presence. I spent years confusing control for strength and busyness for purpose. And one day, my body spoke out, and it spoke the truth that my mind had refused to hear up until that point. And what was the result? Anxiety, depression, burnout, autoimmune disease, disconnection, dissociation, and a deep knowing that I had abandoned my wild essential self. And my healing, well, it didn't come through another certification or diagnosis or a prescription. It came through remembrance of the ancient rhythmic ways of being that modern life had made me forget. So through reconnecting with the natural living world, with ceremony, with my voice, with movement, with breath, with my body, through returning to what I now call the 10 elemental pillars of rewilding wellness: light, conscious consumption, play, land and nature, movement, rest, community, ceremonies, sacred space, and breath. This was my rewilding. In that book, it's part memoir, part medicine guide, my journal. Through grief, awakening, motherhood, reclamation. This was my story. This was Laura's story. I'm sure some of you out there listening, this is your story too. It's about walking out of the noise of a culture obsessed with fixing and restoring the rhythm of the earth, where we remember that we were never broken. This is a call for all of us, for humanity, to come home to ourselves, to our instincts, to our original soul design, our original architecture, our divine blueprint, these multiple dimensions of being that are our essential architecture. This is how we reclaim our sovereignty. True wellness isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering who you already are. And this is why I do this work, because I've lived it. And I've reclaimed my rhythm. And now I'm here to help others do the same. So Laura's stories show us mental health challenges are never just mental. Real healing is comprehensive. It's rooted, it's rhythmic, it's real. It's multidimensional medicine. I invite you to reflect on your own rhythms and where they might be out of balance. Any symptom is a signpost. It is a signal. It is a communication letting you know that you have gone out of alignment and you have gone out of balance. So I'm going to close this episode with a very brief blessing here. May we all remember that our body is wise, our minds are sacred, and our spirits are unbreakable. May each of us find the rhythm that leads us back home to ourselves. This is Rewilding Wellness. If this episode made an impact on you, please reach out to me and let me know. Give me your feedback. If this show made you begin to question symptoms that you've been struggling with, reach out to me. I'm here to help you. There are many ways I can speak to you. We can email, we can talk. Follow my social media pages on Facebook and Instagram. Read my posts, watch my videos. My new book, Rewilding Wellness, Rooted Wisdom to Rise Well, will be out soon. But please, please, please remember, we are multidimensional beings. Behind the mind is the real root cause of mental health. This multidimensional path to healing is how we go from breaking down to breaking through. This changes everything. Thank you guys for joining me. Until next time, have a beautiful day.